Absolutely. So welcome, folks. If you've just joined us and wondering what's going on, you haven't missed anything. This is just the unofficial start. And I'll talk to that a little bit more once we get into this session about taking fun more seriously. But we're trying to solve these cryptic clues that appear on the screen. Already, 3 of them now have been solved, Elise. We have number 1 is long underwear. Number 2 has just been solved. All close. There's just a little bit missing, Kristen, from your answer. You've said under the weather. What's the full saying? I'll see if someone else can pull it in. And number 3, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Feeling under the weather, Elise. Yes. You get the points for that one, but thank you very much for helping there. Oh, Leanna also.
Leanna got it. Leanna got it.
Got it. Oh, yes. I'm just catching up on my chat room there. So what's number 4, 5, and 6? We're about to make an official start. We've also been sharing what amazes us. Things that amaze us. And you may catch up on that in the chat room. John says it amazes him how much beauty is waiting to be discovered. Oh my goodness, yes, I've been so fortunate in my life to have traveled around this world, and I've only seen a fraction of that beauty, even though I've traveled very widely. Sunrises, yes, and they're always so different every morning, Nadine. I love that too. All right, let's give it one more minute. Can we solve number 4, 5, and 6? Unless, of course, Nadine, you thought you were solving something with the word sunrises. If that's the case, then no, that is not the answer to any one of those last 3 as we go. See if you can find a word that sits in number 4, and that might give you a clue as to how to say number 4. There's something special about the way the numbers appear in number 5. And if you read number 6 left to right, that'll help you.
Rebecca!
Hole in one, Rebecca got there too. Yes, John.
Reese, it was a Reese.
You can all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. You managed to all get it together at the same time. Hole in one for number 4. All right, we're going to bring these home. High five, Nadine. Well done. We're left with number 6, Elise. Let's recover them, and then I'll give you number 6 if we don't see it in the chat room. Number 1 was long underwear. Number 2, feeling under the weather. Hopefully that's not you today. Number 3 is 1 step forward, 2 steps back. 4, hole in one. You can see the word hole is inside the word one. High five. That's a virtual high five to all of you. And I don't see an answer for number 6. If you read it from left to right, the first thing you notice about the word is the big U. Ambiguous. Ambiguous. That is the cryptic clue for the word ambiguous. Well, welcome, folks. I'm now going to turn over to Elise, who's going to get us started this morning, this afternoon, this evening, no matter where you happen to be beaming from. Over to you, Elise.
Oh, perfect. Let's not be so ambiguous about why we are here today. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Our purpose in this session is to discover why play is so important and how to bring play into our business meetings. If you missed the earlier introduction, our guest today is Mark Collard. He is the CEO and founder, or the co-founder and the principal at Playmeo. I first ran into Mark's work, years ago when I was searching out fun videos about meetings. And I ran across a video he had done about a group energizer called Knee Tag. And he had this whole group of business people sort of shuffling around with their hands on their knees, trying to tap each other and listening to their experiences and getting engaged. And I thought that looked like so much fun. And I have never once been able to convince a group to do it, but I was able to convince Mark to come here and present to us today. And so I am thrilled to turn this over to him. We are going to play. We're going to have fun. The chat's open, video's on. Any questions at any point, let us know.
Absolutely. Right, you're welcome. Thank you very much, Elise, for the invitation. And folks, thank you, first of all, for being here. Whatever you've done in your day and agenda to take and find this slice of time, I really, really appreciate. Any opportunity for me to play is always a joy. But particularly today, because clearly we're being beamed in from all parts of the world. My name is Mark Collard. I'm the founder of a little organization called Playmeo. Most people know about Playmeo because of this online activity database, which I'm going to reference during the course of this presentation. There are so many free resources I'm going to share with you. You're going to have lots of ways of being able to play outside of this session as well. The guts of this session, but most of my work as a trainer, an author, and a speaker is to help people connect. As simple as that, in 3 words, help people connect. Because I know that when those connections are stronger, my groups can get more stuff done. They become more productive. You amplify the results of whatever you're trying to get done. So today, apart from also sharing some actual practical activities, experiences that you can embed in your own groups and meetings, is to help you understand a little bit of why fun should be taken more seriously. I happen to have gone back a slide for some reason, but this was the unofficial start. Now, I'm going to refer back to this later on, but welcome to those folks who have just joined us. This is what you missed. We had some experiences as we were waiting to get started to engage people and invite some interaction. So this was all happening in the background, but everything I'm doing today was intentional. There was some intentionality, and you'll note that that's a big part of why taking fun more seriously is really important. So we're going to come back to that, but for those who missed it, just wanted to quickly show that too, and then we come back to this. There's me. At the moment, I'm in a little pixelated version in the corner, but that's me, full swing somewhere in China in the middle of a keynote speech. These are a couple of the books. I know Elise managed to get a copy of Count Me In many, many years ago. So I work as an author, but most of my time, as I've said, is working as a trainer, and most people know me through Playmio, which is just the name of my business. These are my contact details. I will have them there again at the end of the session, but a lot of people like to know where these are now. Take a screenshot of it now if you choose, even though we are recording. You can come back to this at any time. If you would like to follow up with me, that is my genuine commitment to any presentation I make. I'd be happy to have you reach out to me if you've got a question based on this presentation, or just anything about how I can improve the productivity and connections in the groups that you work with. My first question, though, is, are you ready to engage? I've got to get that while it might be Friday morning, 10 o'clock here in Melbourne, Australia, most of you are still in Thursday. It's the end of your day, more than likely. How prepared are you to engage today? And very quickly, you can see 5 little emojis that I've just pulled from my emoji deck of cards. So using the annotate tool, if you're not familiar with that, if you place your cursor over, there should be something on your screen that talks about how the screen is being shared. You should be able to find the annotate tool. You can then choose the stamp tool and then choose anything. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it, but if you just follow those instructions, tell us and mark somewhere, stamp somewhere on here to give me an idea of where you are at right now. And as I can see, many of you now, maybe you love to wear Ray-Bans, I'm not sure, but you're ticking the Ray-Ban close to the very effervescent, fresh-looking face, and a few folks that are in the middle, which is good. Just acknowledging where people are at doesn't necessarily solve the problem of the fact that they might be at the left-hand side of the scale, but just acknowledging it can be enough to move people into a different headspace. When we charge headlong into something without acknowledging where people are at, sometimes that can create some resistance, residual resistance, which makes it difficult for us to get things done in our meeting, in our gatherings, and our time together. So thank you for those who have just engaged. You've given us a sense of where your energy is at right now. I'm going to clear all of that at this point, clear all of those, and so that I can move on. Oh, I'm still doing it. Always forget to get rid of that and move on. Can I say, first of all, I've got a few slides, but most of the time today is going to be spent directly to camera. But I want to give some context to what I'm going to share with you that points to the purpose of this session. First of all, we as humans are designed to interact and connect. But here's the problem. After 32 years of this work of training people all over the world, I've found these three things to be true. First of all, when it's not fun, and I want to broaden your understanding of fun today, when it's not fun, we all understand it's difficult to engage. We all know that to be true. Why is that? It's because we want to be able to connect, but we don't want to if we feel that we're going to be threatened or embarrassed. If we think that the level of interaction is going to threaten us or embarrass us, we will pull back. So if it's not fun, and that for me is the kicker, it's the magic weapon that I'm using, if I could even use that word, it's the thing that actually engages people to participate without really knowing what's going on. So when it's not fun, it's really hard to engage. And I know for all of the educators, all of the business leaders I work with, almost 1 out of every 2 questions comes down to, Mark, can you teach me how to engage my staff? How can I engage my students? 1 out of every 2 questions is related to that concept alone. And so fun is the key. I'm going to come out and explore that more with you shortly. So that's the first thing that I've noticed. 2, when there's no trust, sometimes it's a negative, like there's just a betrayal of trust. But when there's no trust, people pull back from participating. So when people pull back, obviously that's not going to help you achieve your aims. What you're going to notice that I'm talking about today is moving your participants, your staff, your members from consumers to contributors. That is one of the biggest benefits of connection. When you can build those connections within your staff, you move them from consumption to contribution. And I'm sure all of us today would want to see more of the people that we're working with and meeting with contributing and not just simply consuming the time that they're with you. And that's often because there's a lack of trust. They pull back from participating. And the last part, probably not as critical from many of the meetings you're a part of, but when there's no challenge, you're left with just boredom and routine. Less important for you, particularly for the work that I do in education. This is a critical element. When there's no challenge, kids are bored, adults are bored. But when there is a challenge, that's often removed and the routine is also removed as well. So I want to give that context to begin, because there are now 3 elements to what I share around connection that are 3 critical elements. And the first one is to connect before your content. I'm not being rude here. I actually don't care what your content is, because you're dealing with a human being. That we've already talked about some of the universal principles of working with humans a moment ago. Whatever your content is, I can guarantee you that you will amplify the results of whatever you're trying to get done if you spend a little bit of time and effort. And let me just stop there for a second. Time and effort. Yes, unashamedly, it's going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of effort to help your group connect, to allow you to amplify those results. And this term, and it's bandied around in our industry quite a lot these days, that I love, is to connect before content. You'll note now that even before we started this session today, I invited you to connect. I invited you to share something that amazed you, and that we noted that other people were also connecting to oh yeah, I love sunrises too, for example. That was intentional. That was not an accident. So we invited you to connect with those solving those Wordle puzzles. That was an intention as well. So to connect before content. Now, I'm really paring this down. I'm going to call this a fast food version of this part of my presentation, because this is a whole several hours conversation. But there's one piece of research I want to share with you that is related to why this is so important. I'm pulling this out from a group that I'm sure you're familiar with called the Partnership for 21st Century Learning. It's made up of businesses, governments, schools, NGOs, anywhere where people are responsible for the well-being of others. And they did a meta-analysis. What that means is they just took a whole lot of other research, put it all together, and came up with this one conclusion. That research clearly shows. Now, I'm going to help you understand what all of this means. Programs. When you think programs, you probably think, oh, that doesn't relate to meetings. No. Programs, in the definition of this research, was anywhere where someone was responsible for the well-being of others. If you're leading a meeting, if you're leading a conference, a seminar, a workshop, you come under this definition of programs. So research clearly shows that programs which intentionally develop healthy and trusting relationships, I put that in blue, intentionally. If your understanding of just putting a whole lot of people into a room and that those really powerful, positive relationships will just develop, good luck to you. It often doesn't. They need some leadership and some intentionality behind that. And when that does occur, from the beginning, that those programs outperform all others based on a number of criteria, in particular, greater participation. Who doesn't want that in our meetings? Stronger relationships, again, that amplifies everything you're trying to get done, and increased overall performance. So if you're in a school, that's academic performance. If you're a for-profit organization, that's a profit. There are lots of ways of being able to understand that. Again, I have so much more other research, and if you're interested in the science behind connection and play, I have a whole webpage I can direct you to when we get to the Q&A section that I'd be happy to tell you about as well. So that's the first of what used to be two critical elements. But when the pandemic hit, this presentation morphed to add a third. But the first two are still the same. That's the first one, to connect before content. The second one is that environment dictates performance. Environment dictates performance. So we want to change the performance, but if you don't actually influence the environment, the performance won't change. It's a bit like the saying that politics lives downstream from culture. Politics lives downstream from culture. If you think that just changing the politicians is going to change the culture, it's backwards. You have to change the culture, and the culture is what actually creates different sorts of politicians, as just one example. It's the same in your meetings. It's the same in your conferences, your seminars, your classrooms, your training rooms. One of your primary responsibilities as a leader, being responsible for the well-being of others, is to create an environment in which people can make appropriate choices. Again, think back to that early conversation about who we are as people. We're wired to connect, but we pull back because we're concerned about being threatened or embarrassed. You create an environment in which people feel comfortable, they're going to move from being consumers of that time to a contributor. They're going to lean into the conversation. Again, I could spend so much more time on this piece, but two critical elements, understand, are a theme throughout our presentation today. Connect before content, whatever that content might be, and that the environment will dictate the performance. So if you spend a lot of time creating that right environment, it will help influence the performance that you earn. Now, when the pandemic hit, it actually changed my presumptive setting. Perhaps it did for you as well. My presumption was, for the last 31 years, was that groups turned up. And then when the pandemic hit, that was no longer true. And so I had to add a further critical element to focus on the visuals. And I think the best way I can describe this, you will all understand what I mean by this. It's at play right now, because I'm standing here in Melbourne, you're some other part of the world, and I'm this very small picture in the corner of your screen. So this was me, full flight, in another keynote address somewhere in Sydney, I think some years ago, talking to 350 groups or whatever. And I do have a slide. I have a few slides in some of my keynotes, but I'm the dynamic. I'm the full picture. Yes, there are some other distractions, but between a big screen and me on the stage, it's easy for me to keep people's attention. Next to this. Now, this gentleman just worked out that he's wondering if he left the oven on before he left to go to work today. He's not sure. He's clearly distracted because there are so many other distractions. Who knows if you've been checking email, the latest headlines on the news website, someone's come to the door, you picked up your phone, you checked your Facebook, whatever. There's just so many other distractions when there's only a little bit of me in the corner. And so notice, to this point in my presentation, and I'm about to finish, I've used about 10 or 12 slides over the course of the last 10 or 12 minutes. I've frequently engaged you by changing. This is what the brain is noticing, is by changing it. When you put a slide up and you sit there for 15 minutes and talk about it and not change it, you can expect people to fall asleep. And so understanding, if you're looking to engage people, to improve the productivity of the time that you're with them, appreciate that in the online context, you really need to think more carefully about the visuals, because they're no longer focused on you. There are so many other options in that space. Again, I could talk to more about that, but keep that in mind based on some of the things that we're about to do. It's time, Elise, to play. But that part that we've just shared is so important because it actually frames everything that we're going to do and then talk about when we get to the Q&A. So welcome. We're now full screen. Hopefully you're full screen. You can choose whatever you do here, but here's my suggestion for our first experience. And welcome if you've just joined us, by the way. Change the view to a gallery view if you want to. You don't have to. There's no issue. And if you wish to turn on your camera, this will absolutely be worthwhile. But it's up to you, of course, if you'd rather just watch everyone else. But if you want to turn on your camera, you're going to see a wonderful experience fold out before you. So as you're going to do that, here's what's about to happen. Notice that I'm using my fingers to identify the outline of the thumbnail of the video that I'm in. So can you go ahead and do that now? Just outline in your own screen roughly the space in which you are virtually working with. Beautiful. You got it perfectly right, by the way. Excellent. Notice when I say the word left, I want you to move your body, or if you're on a seat, just lean to the left-hand side. So go left. Beautiful. Now go right, which for those who are interested, it's the other side. Great. There's only two directions in this story that I'm going to tell you. So when you hear the word left, I want you to quickly move to the left-hand side of your screen and then quickly come back to equilibrium. So you go left, then come back. You go right, you come back. Here's the key, and this is a self-assessed test here, folks. These were always my favorite tests at school, were the self-assessed ones, because I'd always get a high distinction. So you will earn a high distinction no matter what you do here. You get to determine how successful you are, because I would like to tell you now a story about Mr. and Mrs. Wright. That's your first clue. Move to your right. I'd like to tell you a story about Mr. and Mrs. Wright. One evening, they were baking cookies, and Mrs. Wright suddenly called out, "Oh no, there's no flour left. You will need to go to the store right now." I can't believe you forgot to check the pantry," grumbled Mr. Wright. "Oh, it will only take 20 minutes if you come right back. Go to the corner of 1st and 2nd Streets and turn left at the stop sign. Then go to 43rd Street and turn right, and the shop will be on your left," declared Mrs. Wright as her husband left the house. Doing a good job. Mr. Wright found the store and asked the assistant where he could find the flour. The assistant pointed and said, "Go to aisle 4 and turn left. The flour and sugar will be on your left." Mr. Wright made his purchase and walked right out the door. He turned left, but he couldn't remember where he had left his car. Suddenly, he remembered that he had driven Mrs. Wright's car and that his car was in the driveway at home right where he had left it. He finally found the right car, opened the boot, and put the flour right inside. Eventually, a weary Mr. Wright found his way home. Mrs. Wright had been waiting impatiently. "I thought you would be right back," she said. "I left all the cookie ingredients on the kitchen counter and the cats got into the milk. You'll just have to go right back to the store and shop again." Mr. Wright sighed. He had no energy left. "I'm going right to bed," he said, and left Mrs. Wright standing in the kitchen. Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. Well done. Now, I could only catch the periphery of the action on my screen, but I saw a lot of people going backwards and forwards. Now, clearly a little bit of fun. And there are so many ways in which that activity can be morphed. And that's true for everything I'm going to share with you today. Everything for the resources I'm going to point you to is that the trap you will fall into is thinking the way you see it done is the way it can only be done. Bang, bang. It's so not true. There are so many different variations to all of these things. Not only are there different stories, but there are different ways. For example, I know of folks who actually embed other directions like up and down. So they ask people to bob up and down. I had a PE teacher once who told me that he gets them to do some sort of exercise when he beds that into the story. One of the most fascinating ones for me was, this was a community leader who had said they told a story that was embedded with a variety of resources or objects. And the point was, by the time we got to the end of the story, anyone who'd collected the most number of resources, like who had physically grabbed them. So if the word phone was used, they got a point. If something like a card or a folder was used, just looking at what's on my desk, they would get a certain number of points. It's fun. It builds energy. It takes a minute or two. And what you've got now is a group who's engaged. They're now leaning in and they're awake, their brain's switched on, and perhaps now that conversation that required all of those things to be in place are ready to go. There's no magic in my story. There's no magic in this activity, or indeed any activity I'm presenting. It comes back to the framework that we shared earlier on. It's that fun. When it's not fun, it's difficult to engage. And when it is, people switch on their cameras and give it a go. Not embarrassed, not threatened. And even if you, for whatever reason, chose not to, that's cool. You still get to enjoy watching everyone else have a fun time as well. If you have questions, I'm not checking the chat room. I will get to that shortly when we move to Q&A in a few moments. But let me continue to share some experiences with you. Excuse me. For now, can I ask you to find maybe the back of a sheet of paper or just any sheet of paper? It could be an index card. Mine's about a half A4 sheet of paper. I'm using one side of it. And then I'm now deliberately folding mine in half. You don't need to do this. But on the top half, notice that there's another part to it. I've written my name in a marker. If you could find a marker or something that's really quite easy to read on paper, I would like you to write your name. It works much better if you write your name and not my name. So my name is Mark, and that's why I wrote Mark. If your name is John or Nadine or Gillian, Gillian, that's the name of my wife. There's a very special thing about that. I'm going to come back to that later on, Gillian. I know I can see you smiling. All right, so you've written your name on the top half of your piece of paper. All right, I'm going to show you the rest of it, even if you're still rustling around for your piece of paper. Now, you'll notice now, I'm going to bring this nice and close, that there is a series of numbers and a couple of letters at the bottom. I don't know for your particular situation and where you might be coming from, but I do know there's a thing called a social security number. In Australia, we don't have one of those, but every part of our life is often identified with a number. You don't often have much choice over that. I'm going to invite you to create your own identity number. And I'm going to give you an example. And in a moment, I'll ask for a couple of volunteers to share if they choose. But here's what you can see on mine. 12M, 15Y, 19Y, 13S, 5M. Now, the letters are important. Every one of these numbers gives a clue about who I am, something about my identity. In the chat room, although we've only got a small number of people, we could actually ask you to come, maybe for a brief moment, come off mute and just tell me, what do you think that any one of these numbers might mean? 12, 15, 19, 13, or 5? Who would like to give it? You could use the chat room as well. Have a guess. What could the 12, 15, or 19, 13,
month, year, seconds, minutes?
Oh, okay. Nice thinking. Yes. I'm going to give you a clue. The M stands for month. What could the 12th month represent? Probably giving you a big clue there.
I'm wondering if the top three lines are the age of your offspring, Mark.
Oh, okay.
A
good
baby,
thinking.
a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old, which might be rude because you might be too young to have a 19-year-old.
Nicely played, Gillian. Well played. Let me give you a further clue. 12 is the month of my birth. I was born in December. 15, and this is where you come into it, Gillian. Today is the anniversary, the 15th anniversary of my wedding. I've been married for 15 years to a woman named Gillian, or Jilly as I know her. 19 years was how long I had a car before I finally traded it in. That just happened. 13S, the street number that I live in. 5M, that's again M for months. This one's a hard one. No one ever gets this. Roughly speaking, until the pandemic, I've lived about 5 months of my life sitting in the fuselage of a plane, traveling and crisscrossing the globe to do training. I spend most of my time out of this country, except for the last 18 months. 5 months of my life I've spent inside a plane, traveling around the world. So this is my identity number. Perhaps you've now written some numbers for yourself. So go ahead, find 3, 4, or 5 numbers. If you want to help us give a clue as to, in my case, 12th month, 15 years, 19 years, 13 street number, give us a little number or a letter that might give us a clue. And in a few moments, if you're ready, come off mute and tell us that you're willing to share your identity with other people. Now, there's actually quite a few things running behind this I'm going to share with you in a moment, but let's just get a few examples from people. So I'll give some thinking music in the background. Dun 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 dun. Okay. Do we have someone, even if you're only partway through your numbers, who would like to show us your identity number? Bring it up nice and close to the screen so that we can all see it, a bit like what I did. And if you can hold it. So, Rachel, I can see you. You've done it on the back of a Post-it note, I think. You've got a 6C. Oh, I'm coming really close. 16R, is it? And a QD. I can't quite read that last one. Perhaps, Rachel, could you come off mic and tell us? Oh, can't hear you. Oh.
0D.
Oh, it's a 0D. Okay,
Sorry.
great. So, Rachel, can you show us those again? Again, folks, in the chat room, or come off mic for a brief moment. Work out what 6C, 16R, and 0D mean. I'm going to say 6 cats. Do you have 6 cats in your life? 6 children.
Cats.
Oh, cats. All right. I could pick a cat person. All right. What have we got for 16R and 0D? We've got 0 dogs. Oh, wow. So,
Rats?
Is this your flatmate answering these questions?
16 roosters.
It's rats. Whoever said rats got it.
Of rats?
Was it your flatmate that answered these questions? How would they know all of those? That's amazing, Rachel. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, let's give it one more go. Who's got another one? We'll do this last one. Beck. All right, we've got a 3C, 15, bit closer. I can't quite see it. A Y and a 200D. 3C, 15Y, 200D. All right.
2 children?
3 children.
Correct.
Okay.
Married 15 years.
Correct.
Oh, snap. 200Ds though.
And you're 200 years old.
So Mark should get this one if he's in Melbourne, the same as me.
I don't see the letter.
Lockdown.
Yes, 200
Oh.
days.
Oh, it's a D.
Oh, well, I come from the most lockdown city in the world. We've only come out of lockdown
Yeah,
the last
same.
few weeks, but yes, 267 days of lockdown.
Yeah.
Woo! Yeah, pretty crazy.
I thought it was
Rebecca,
200. You've just educated me. It's at 67 more. It felt
Yeah,
like
there was
500.
there was 267 of them. I counted every single one of them. Rebecca, thank you for playing. All right, I'm going to keep moving on, but again, here's an opportunity that not only was engaging people, but there's a few other things going on. First of all, we got to know a little bit about each other. I've worked frequently with teams that know each other very, very well. In fact, when I talk about my process, I say, oh, Mark, you can dispense with the icebreakers because we know each other very well, which is ordinarily just an excuse for really saying we're aware of each other's presence. They actually don't know much about each other at all, just as we discovered perhaps in some of the numbers that you choose. Here's the other thing, again, going back to that concept of why that fun is so important, concerned that you're going to be embarrassed or threatened. You had a choice here. No one had a gun to your head writing certain numbers onto your particular identity number. And so you got to choose what you wanted to share. Ordinarily, in the face-to-face world, I would have people actually pair up and try to guess what their partner's numbers are. Of course, it's not a test. You'll tell them at some point. And one of the funniest things, and I saw it again today, was a 0. And it was back in the days when I wasn't actually adding extra letters to help give a clue. No one could work out what the 0 meant. And it turned out that this gentleman said the 0 represented the number of hairs on his head. He was completely bald. Now, for some people, that would be an embarrassing, threatening moment perhaps for them, but it wasn't. He was quite happy to use that as part of his identity. Again, lots of ways this can be varied. You could relate it to a particular topic or a theme or a focus for your group at that particular point in time. But it invites people to interact. You can have a bit of fun. It doesn't have to always be serious. And it can then elevate people's engagement as well. Now, at this point, Elise, can you bring up our poll? I don't think I've got the ability on my screen.
You know what? I completely failed.
Oh, that's okay.
Can we come back to that in just a second?
No need to, because we can just do it in an alternative way. So we had planned to give you a Zoom poll, but we're going to still do the same thing. Here's what's going to happen. You may want to use that same piece of paper. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and each question comes with 2 choices. All I would like you to do is to record your choices. And so at this stage, it looks a bit vague. So here, let me give you the first of the 5. The first one relates to drinks. And I'm going to give you two options, and you need to write down your preference. You will prefer one over the other. Coke or Pepsi? Coke or Pepsi? Don't tell us, don't put it in the chat room, just simply write down which one of those two caramel, sticky, carbonated drinks do you prefer over the other. If you hate them both, hopefully one of them you hate a little less than the other, and that's the one you will write down. You need to write down an answer. Okay, Coke or Pepsi, you should have one answer written down. Now I'm going to take it another level. Can I ask you now, as much as you might know or not know about this group, we've got roughly, 19, 20 people on this call. In a moment, we're going to survey everybody. Is this a Coke loving group as a majority preference, or is it a Pepsi loving group as a majority preference? And you don't know. You're not going to survey them just yet. We'll find out in a moment. But if you had to guess, if you had to speculate, are more people writing down Coke on their piece of paper or Pepsi? It might be very different to your preference, but you're speculating the majority preference for this group. How well do we know this group? Let's find out. All right, so it's Coke or Pepsi. That's your first one. Here's your second one. Dark chocolate, white chocolate. Dark chocolate, white chocolate. Again, if you hate chocolate, hopefully one of them you hate a little less than the other. But in my experience, there's a lot of chocoholics out there. Which one would you prefer? If you could only have one type of chocolate for the rest of your life, would it be dark chocolate or white chocolate? What would you prefer? And of course, speculate on the next to your answer, perhaps in a different column if you want to call it. What's this group? Is it a dark chocolate loving group or a white chocolate loving group? Let's find out. We'll find out in just a few moments. That's number two.
This is why I forgot, because I couldn't even believe this is a question.
I think I'm with you on this one, Elise, but let's not give anything away just yet. That's true. I got it. All right. Number three. This should check it on your answer sheet. Number three. Video games, board games. That's B-O-A-R-D, not B-O-R-E-D. Board games or video games. Again, if you could only have one type of game for the rest of your life, what would your preference be? Board games or video games? And speculate. Is this a board game loving group or a video game loving group? Not adding any value here. It's not wrong or right. Just make a speculation. That's number three, related to games. You've got two more to go, and then we'll see how well connected we are when we use the chat room shortly. But at the moment, you're just writing it down. The next one, this relates to, let's say, the size of groups. Big party, small gathering. Big party, small gathering. What's your preference? If for the rest of your life, you could only have one type of group, would you want small gathering, which we're probably thinking 2 or 3 or 4 people at most? Or is it a big party? Okay. All right. That's number 4. Again, hopefully you've speculated. Is this a big party kind of group, or is there preference for small gathering kind of group? You have one more to go. This is probably the tougher one and the one I'm going to predict. I already know the answer to, because I've now asked this question hundreds, if not thousands of times of groups all over the world. This one relates to feedback. Honesty, other people's feelings. Honesty or other people's feelings. Are you brutally honest when you give feedback at the expense of their feelings? Or do you pull back a little bit on the honesty because you're very sensitive to how it might land and sensitive to their other people's feelings? Honesty, other people's feelings. Okay. You should have now perhaps 2 columns, one answer for yourself, and then you've predicted an answer for everybody else. Just focused on your own individual answers. Here, and listen carefully to what I'm about to ask you to do. In the chat room, but do not hit enter. In the chat room, I want you to write down the answers to each of the 5 questions for your personal preference. So if Coke was your personal preference, you're going to write down Coke and then either dash or a comma, and then write down your chocolate, and then your game, and then your group, and then your feedback. So in one line, do not hit enter until I ask you to. Just simply write down your 5 answers to your personal preference. And when you're ready, I will get that sense and I'll then tell you what to do next. Okay. All right. So getting a few thumbs up. So you should have written 5 of your answers into the chat room. You haven't hit enter because you're all very cooperative and willing to listen. All right. Does anyone need more time? All right. Okay. We're now going to do a big Zoom bomb. You're going to hit enter all at the same time on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Boom. It's like my inbox when I first open up my emails in the morning. Just feels. Now, a couple of things can happen from here. I would like you to look to see if anyone else had exactly the same 5 preferences as you. Go ahead and find someone else who has at least 4, if not all 5, same preferences as you. Good thing, at least we didn't have 200 people here today. That would have been much more difficult. Okay, and then, again, we're going to spend a lot of time on this. Bruce, you've got your hand up, so do you want to come off mute and just ask a quick question?
No, I may have heard this wrong, but I found someone who has the exact same responses.
Perfect. Excellent. You are made for each other. It doesn't mean anything necessarily, but connection starts with commonality. When you go to a conference filled with people you don't know, I can guarantee you 95% of your conversation is about seeking commonality. Where are you from? What do you do? Who do you work for? How many times have you been to this conference? It's all about seeking commonality because that's where we find comfort. When you find some, I have an aunt who lives in that city, blah, 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 bang, commonality. So it's about commonality. Now, can you find someone who has exactly the opposite to you? Maybe 1 or 2 of them are the same, but most, if not all of them, are completely different. So if you said Coke, look for someone who said Pepsi. If you said dark, you went for white chocolate, so on, so on, and so on. Lots of ways in which this can be revealing as much as interactive and a little bit of fun. And here's what I've noticed. I've often used this as a barometer. In the beginning, when a group is just forming, they often aren't very well connected. That is, that when that comes to looking at that second column, how well do you know this group? Because if we were to spend a bit of time now and work out how many people said Coke and how many people said dark, my guess is most of us are Coke drinking, dark chocolate, board game loving, small group people who are very sensitive to the way our feedback lands with other people's feelings. That's the sort of group generally we could work out. With a poll, we could have worked it out instantly, but you could still do it through this, just through a more analog version. So just learning more about the group. And as the group spends more and more time together, when you ask the question about, okay, speculate, how well do you know this group? What do you think this group's preference might be for this? And it might be really quite serious questions like a particular type of decision, a particular type of preference for 4 options. Which one would you go with? This could be a really a great strategy to move you forward into that space. Thank you. That's Must Choose. I have so much more I was going to share with you, but what I am going to do is just come back to the slides briefly so I can then open up to some time with you to ask some questions. There's a lot of resources I can share that will give you access to much more than what I've already done here. So with your permission, Elise, I'm going to return to our screen and that gorgeous little boy who's running around having a play. I am going to say this one here. We're not going to do it, but I might have asked a question that I could use as an unofficial start, but I can also use it as just a way to re-engage the brains of the group I'm working with. And I would ask them to do it this way. And here's a strategy that I found really successful, particularly online, but it works just as well if I was in person with a group. I would ask a question and I would ask everyone to just simply enter it like you did before with Must Choose. You just put it in the chat room, but did not hit enter. So everyone answers the question. In my case, I used to believe that old people ran out of words. They talked too much when they were younger, and that's why you see them walking up and down the streets, jibber jabbering, nothing's coming out of their mouth. Because I believed as a kid, we all ran out of words. That's pretty strange now. So I'd write that in. And then on go, everyone hits it. And then someone curious enough to go, oh, that's really interesting. Hey, Rachel, could you tell us more about what you thought about that? And then Rachel would pick the next person because she saw someone else's response. I call that curiosity ping pong. And for me, that's a critical element that takes difference. Think about all those differences that we've just discussed, the 5 differences. When you take difference and add curiosity, you create opportunities for connection. That's been a real truth for me in the last 30 years. Anyway, that's an activity we didn't get to. This is the list of activities that we didn't get to all of them, but we got to most of them. Feel free to take a screenshot of that because these are the words where you can find more information about all of these and almost 500 other experiences just like this online. So if you want to take a screenshot of that, that's good. If not, we're recording it. All of these experiences come from our database online. You can use your phone, you can use your desktop or tablet at playmio.com. It's a nonsensical word, but clearly has the word play because it's a fervent belief that when we invite people to play, it actually opens up opportunities for connection. There's tons of stuff. If you go to playmio.com/free, Elise is going to confirm this later on, but there it is on the screen right now. Lots and lots of free resources. Yes, it is a subscription-based service. However, there's a lot of stuff that you can play with that costs you absolutely nothing. First of all, there's an app you can download right now that'll give you access to dozens of these activities. There's a 7-day field trial. There's an ebook that'll tell you about our top 10 icebreakers. And there's also a Facebook group. There's a blog. There's a newsletter. There's all that normal stuff you can get access to completely for free. And then there's also a couple of books. Now, these aren't the 2 that Elise actually happened to have, but they are 2 of our biggest sellers. As I'm based in Melbourne, most of you are not. Going to Amazon is probably your best bet, but you can also clearly get these through Playmio as well. There's my contact details again, folks. I'm keen to hear from you and engage with your questions. And it's now time for Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing, come back to the screen, see all your lovely smiling faces. It always seems to go so fast, Elise. There was some fast food action in those initial frameworks that I shared, but I think what I'm most excited about is now answering questions, inviting people to contribute from here as we lead up to the top of our hour. So over to you, group. What questions would you like to ask me?
I have a question. When we did the exercise, there was one other person, like I said honesty at the end. I think maybe there were 2 other people that said honesty as well. And because we were in the minority, in a group, would then we become even closer because there were just a fewer of us?
It's a bit of a yes and a no. And I'm sorry, I don't see your name on the screen, so I'm not using your name here, but thank you for the question. And it's a yes and a no. It just means on that particular point, that particular question, at that moment in time, you have a similar answer to the question. So it might open up a conversation about, okay, so why is it? For example, this is what I would do. I would say, okay, find someone who has the same sort of answer to you. And then now your next question is, find out from your partner, why is it that they answered the question that way? And you might discover through that conversation, being curious, that you become even more connected to them. It's like, oh my goodness, you're right. That's really important to me. And then that connection is built. But it comes from, in your case, you're talking about 2 people who have the same answer. Guess what? I'd ask the same question of 2 people who had different answers. All right, find someone now who had a different answer to you. And then I'd say, okay, explain to your partner why you answered the question the way you did. And you might, just by leaning in and being curious about how the other person views the world, go, you know what? Now that I think about it, that's really important to me. And so it's the opportunity for that connection. Really, this is just a tool. There's no magic. Please understand that there's no magic at all in any of this stuff. But the framework within which it's couched is where the magic comes alive. So great question. Thank you for asking.
Looks like Rebecca's got a question.
Oh, good.
I do. Mark, I'm working with a team at the moment as a facilitator, and there's a low level of trust, like the lowest I've actually ever seen. Do you have any particular activities that are the ones you would use more with low trust teams? Because some of the ones we did today, I couldn't imagine would add to their lack of trust.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Yes, there absolutely would be. And I'm frequently engaged in those environments myself, where they believe that an hour or a half a day or 2 days with me is going to change their world. And no, it's only ever a catalyst for opening up opportunities to, but most importantly, change the environment. Because often I'm engaged to try and change the people, but you're not going to change the people because they live downstream from the culture. So if you can attack the culture, then more often than not, you can influence the way the people are behaving. So yes, there are activities. So even if you look at something as simple as must choose, you know, those 5 questions I asked, if you look for questions that aren't typically going to threaten anyone, I gave you a whole gamut, but I can give you a whole lot of questions, hundreds of them, that are just related to Coke or Pepsi, you know, left hand, right hand, you know, blue eyes, some other color eye. There's all those sorts of preferences or categories that wouldn't threaten anyone in terms of the way they're answering. So sometimes looking at even the same activities, but changed so that they would feel more comfortable to participate. And you have to chip away at it. In my experience, I would just spend a great deal more time breaking the ice. And there's a big difference between an icebreaker and experiences that break the ice. That's a whole other conversation we could have. But spending lots of time delivering lots of experiences that continue to chip away, change the way their behaviors or their norms occur. So there would be some activities. And I'd be very happy, Rebecca, if you wanted to follow up after today. I think you said you're in Australia. We're in a similar time zone then, to follow up and give you more specifics around experiences that I think could work in that particular setting.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, I've lost you on my screen, but you're there somewhere.
Gillian.
My question is somewhat related to yours, Rebecca, and I'm thinking about groups that I work with that see themselves as perhaps terribly important and terribly busy, and we don't have time for this play business. And let's get on, you know, we've got limited time, so let's get on.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with the potential resistance you might get in that kind of dynamic?
Great question, Gillian. And there has never been a group that I've worked with in 32 years where there was no resistance at the beginning. Every single group of human beings, as I discussed, while we're wired to connect, we pull back. The problem with that is that we are concerned that the level of interaction we're going to be invited to participate in will threaten or embarrass us.
Mm-hmm.
So my lowest common denominator always is to presume that no one wants to interact. So I'm going to make my program so damn fun that they will uncross their arms on their chests. Can't tell you the number of groups I start with that look like this to begin.
Mm-hmm.
And then they unfurl, lean in because they realize there's nothing to be threatened or to be embarrassed by. That's the quick answer. The experiences then just need to be tailored so that it is obviously fun. And obvious fun is contagious as much as it is powerful. It's like a yawn. If I yawn, good chance there's going to be 3 other people on the call that will yawn with me. They are contagious. There's something about the chemistry there. So for me, it's about being sensitive to how it's going to land. So if I've got a group and I really want to get them out of their seats to move their bodies, because that's a fantastic way to break through ice, is to move people's bodies.
Thinking even when we're online about that?
Exactly, online as well. So I might just have them fix, like, okay, let's not move. Let's just do something that maybe involves the chat room or involves you moving your hands or something like that. So I need to start from that position, win them over by doing something that doesn't threaten and embarrass them, and then build up. And even if it's only infinite. So I'm giving you the general answer here without a specific, because I don't know the situation, but there has never been a group I've worked with where there hasn't been some level of resistance, because they're all human. They're all warm-blooded with a breath. Every single human I've ever worked with have had levels of resistance. And of course, they come in various sizes. You know, there's, chief executive officers that I work with that, roll around on the ground within 3 hours of the start of my program that would never have considered doing that in the first 2 minutes of my program for all the right reasons. I've also worked with...
All credit to you, I would say as well, Mark, for getting them that comfortable.
For sure. And look, that comes with experience after 32 years. And I have a massive database, in my head and online of activities that I can pull out at the right time that just helps chip away at that. But when I'm really focused on helping build connections, I can tell you the reason they're resisting is because they're not comfortable. They don't feel comfortable. And the more you can do to change that environment, the more you'll be successful at asking them to become contributors and not just consuming your time.
Brilliant. Thanks.
I think there was another question, or did I answer it? Hayam, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's a very similar question.
Yeah. And if it sounds like I've answered it before, it's because I have. And it's been a question that I've asked for over 32 years. And I'm still getting better at it. Every group I engage with, particularly now, because so much of my work is international, working in places where I don't even know the language, not to mention the cultural imperatives of that group. And so here's an example, if I can give you a quick one, Elise. Oh, no, maybe I think you need your time. So I need to stop there, don't I? I'll hold this example over for the after party, because I know Elise has an after party. Remind me to tell you about the welcome mat. That this activity was a revelation for me from a cultural perspective about what I have been working with for 30 years everywhere else in the world until it flopped.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to hearing about the welcome mat and to the after party. So if you've been to our events before, we end on time. And then we stick around because there's always stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
That you just need to talk about still. And so those who want to stick are welcome to stick. But before we leave, in our last few minutes, I would love to hear from you. Bottom line up front. In one phrase, a short sentence, and you can either put this in the chat or volunteer to speak. How are you most likely to use what you've learned here today? How are you most likely to use what you've learned here today? Because knowledge ain't the thing until you put it into practice.
Absolutely. We all know how to be fit.
Content. Boom. Love that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Bruce, there's tons. There's just hundreds and hundreds. I think we're up to 488 activities online now. You saw 3 or 4 of them today.
I'm leading a depolarizing meeting right after this one. I think I might do the curiosity. The
Curiosity ping pong?
Ping pong, that'd be great.
It's one of my favorites. Yep. Oh, actually, but I say that for about 500 activities. So
I actually think from a meetings perspective, the riddles at the beginning is great if you're having a meeting because it gets your mind working and your ideas flowing and it really stimulates your mind. So if you're going into a meeting where you have to make decisions or you're brainstorming, that's a great way to start the meeting for the first 5 to 10 minutes because your brain's working then and you're thinking creatively. So I think that's a great strategy.
And again, there's no magic, Liana, in those puzzles. It's the principle of engaging them before the top of the hour. And again, I'll talk more about why that's so important in the follow-up after party.
All right. Using these specific, flexible, applicable ideas, right? All right, cool. All right, so in terms of what you can expect before the after party and after the after party, before, I want you to go ahead and open the link there at the top. That is our feedback link. I ask you to open it now because if I count on you to open it from the email, it will never happen. So do it right this exact moment. And then at some point, give us feedback on this workshop. We really appreciate it. We use that. These are free learning experiences. They're learning experiences for you. They're learning experiences for us. And we do it so that we can all learn us how to do our work better and how to have more fun. So in the coming week afterwards, you will get an email from us with the edited recording, the chat, links to all of the Playmeo resources, slides. Yes, Mark?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Happy to share those. No trouble.
And the links are right there. So with that, we are officially ending on time because, hello, it's meeting performance land. And those of you who have to go, thank you so much for joining us. Those of you who would like to stay for the after party, that starts now.
Well played. And thank you for playing today, folks. I really appreciate you taking that time. So shall I share that welcome mat activity? But I also wanted to follow up on what Liana was saying about that, the impact of an unofficial start, viewing it through the prism of the principle of the experience, not that there was no magic in the puzzle itself. I lectured at a university for 7 years, 2 subjects each semester, which went for about 13 weeks. And as I was working with kids who were fresh out of high school, ordinarily, because now they were responsible for their own time, they wouldn't necessarily turn up on time. And because many other lecturers would wait your obligatory 5 or 10 minutes before you'd get a quorum and then you'd start, why would you ever bother turning up on time if you've got something better to do, knowing that you're just going to sit in the classroom for 5 minutes? So I had a lot to share. I would always start on time, but better than that, I learned that when I started early, like 5 or 10 minutes early, the room was often free. I would implement a variety of, I have dozens and dozens of activities that were not only fun, but were engaging and invited interaction. And here's what happened. Even though participation or attendance was part of the assessment, I can't remember, 15 or 10% of the total assessment of the subject, I never once said, dude, you need to turn up on time. Because I believed that I wasn't their mum or dad, and I wasn't, but I needed them to make the decision that it was worth their time to turn up on time. And here's what happened. Without exception, 14 times in a row, those innovative little activities, the unofficial start, within about the 4th to 5th week of every semester, everyone turned up on time. Because here's what happened. And I never had the language for this back then, but FOMO, the fear of missing out. There was something that happened. You know, when you walk into a room and you can feel the buzz, like there's something here, you go, oh man, what's going on? You do that often enough, it changes your behavior. You go, you know what, I'm going to turn up next time to be there to find out what they're doing that I'm missing out on. And you didn't even have to be there early. Just turning up on time was enough because they were so used to turning up late. So getting them there on time, that principle applies in so many different places, in many different settings. So that's the principle I'm talking about, Liana. It's that FOMO, the fear of missing out. You do that enough and making it worth their while. There's got to be a reward there. That can be really powerful.
So in terms of a business use case, I have a story exactly about that too, because I work with clients to help them do their business culture meetings, right? So, you know, how do leaders who don't have a library of fun games in their heads get the same effect? And this client had the same problem because their offices were literally apart. They were in different parts of the city, and people were always late to the meetings. So they adopted a rule that said they would have the host always be there at least 10 minutes early. And the host showed up, made sure there was coffee on the table, and set up a screen with funny, basically like blooper videos. So they were government industry doing ports and harbor management, and they put up videos of boating accidents, like hilarious boating accidents. And everybody started showing up on time, and they haven't had a late meeting since.
Yeah.
So it's really simple, something funny and some coffee, you know,
and it's the
easy.
principle. I have a chair of part of a board. I'm a director on a board for Outdoors Victoria here in Australia. And the chair always opens with a couple of funny YouTube videos before we start the meeting. And you know that they're all going to be referenced somehow during the meeting. So you better just turn up and watch them. It's definitely worth it. Hey, can I share the welcome mat experience? This was related to the question of sensitivities. For many, many, many years, one of my unofficial starts was as people entered the space, like entered my room, my boardroom, my classroom, whatever, I would place on the ground a sheet of paper that I'd drawn 3 circles with emoji faces: sad, neutral, happy. And there was a little instruction that would say something like, please step on the face that captures how you're feeling right now. So what that was doing for me was a bit like that ready to engage thing that I did as part of the presentation. And I can tell from the number of footprints, I don't have to be watching as my group comes in. I can look at the number of footprints at the end, go, oh, most of my group's in a really good place today, or they're in the middle, or, oh gosh, I've got a large number of people who are not feeling pretty good right now. That would give me a sense of what was going on. And then I went to Thailand. Now, I did a lot of work in Thailand the last couple of years with a corporate business or corporate training organization. And I was fascinated that as they entered the room in a corporate training environment, they actively went out of their way to step over the paper. It's like, no. The whole point is to step on the paper. And then quickly discovered that you don't do that in Thailand. You don't stand on paper. Was part of the cultural imperative of this group. And then I had to then change it. I then asked people as they entered to write their name inside a circle on the whiteboard as they entered, or tick something on a flip chart paper as they entered to give me a clue. But I had never seen it in 32 years. So even though I thought I was doing it right, I learned something then. That's the welcome mat. Ready to engage story. Well, you've got more time for questions, folks. If you're interested, I'm happy to. It's my day's just started. It's not even lunchtime here, so I've got all day.
Mine, I think somebody put it, and this is Nadine, in the chat, asking about timing, how much time you're allowed. And I know it depends on the group, right? And especially virtual, you can do things in breakouts and that type of thing. But when I'm training and facilitating, we're always running on time, and that's in my head. And then people get really into it. I mean, so how much time do you allow to engage, to connect?
There's clearly some really big answers to that question, Nadine. The quick answer is, as you said, it clearly depends on the group. So it's like asking how long is a piece of string? How long would you like it to be? So the principle would be, though, is that connection before content. Whatever time and energy you can find is still going to give you a benefit. Clearly, the more time and energy, the more benefit you receive as a result. And this issue that I get around, but we don't have the time, I push back on. Like I go, well, hang on, but what's the point of your program? If the point of your program is to influence behaviors or achieve a particular result, then that's more likely to be achieved if you've invited that connection up front. So if the issue is, I don't have enough time, well, I can't change that. Maybe you need to be more realistic about what you can actually get done in that 60 minutes, 2 hours, or 5 days, or whatever it is. So I push back with groups that say, we don't have the time. Well, okay, hang on, what's the point then? What are you trying to get done? Is it about just consuming 60 minutes, or is it about achieving a result? And I can guarantee you, if you spend the time to help those groups over time connect more, they're going to turn from consumers to contributors. But it's not an overnight sensation. So anytime you can find, Nadine, is the quick answer to your question. Even if it's just a minute, even if it's just the unofficial start. Great question.
What do you got, Leanna?
I have kind of a different, I guess, unique question. So we've been thinking about groups and teams and group meetings, but what about one-on-one meetings? So have you ever heard how to engage play? If it's, a supervisor, subordinate, one-on-one type of mentor meeting, can you still engage, involve play? Some of these tactics, do they transfer to a one-on-one meeting context?
Yep, and absolutely. I do that not only with my own associates and staff. We always embed at least a couple of minutes of play, because it's something that we look forward to. My associates will say, I wonder what he's going to do today. So I'm under pressure to always look for something that I know is going to be engaging and interactive. And there are many things you can do just with 2 people. So where it's possible. Now, if you're only going to meet for 5 or 10 minutes, there's a fair argument to say, well, let's not waste 2 minutes just playing. But we're thinking about those more substantive moments when you're bringing people together, if you're looking for some sort of change. Because I know the time I invite people to play, it breaks whatever it is they've come from. Like, it lets go of some of that baggage, because they're now mindful of the playful moment. And now we're ready to work, which is a bit like what I asked the group to do earlier today. Are you ready to engage? Most of you were. Fantastic. But sometimes we just launch into it and we don't accept where people are coming from. So it might be, I don't know what's happened for you, Liana. Maybe something really significant has occurred, and that's really weighing on your mind, and you're not actually listening. You're not actually contributing to our meeting. But a playful moment can change the mindfulness of our conversation. It can provide opportunities for a connection. And maybe that 10 minutes is better spent working with you with whatever you're dealing with than the 10 minutes we had hoped to plan to spend with each other.
So now I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So when you talk about play, what definition are you using?
Yeah.
Right.
One of the issues, the limitations of having a fast food slide deck today. Play is, if I want to use the scientific term, is flow. So if you look at the way in which play or fun or flow are defined, flow is those moments where you're engaged with an experience, where you have a loss of time. How often have you been involved with something? Like my mother, she's a great green thumb, and she'll look up and go, oh my goodness, it's dark. She got so absorbed by her experience. That is play. It's fun. Now, I wanted to actually call my book Serious Flow, because that's truly what I was trying to describe, but people would have thought that was a plumbing manual. So I called it Serious Fun because it's a misnomer of terms, but it's the, you get so absorbed by the activity, you're not aware of what's going on around you. You want it to continue. There's no win-lose. You enter into it voluntarily. There's 6 or 7 key elements that make flow or play critical. And we talked about this in the promotional material, Elise, about how play is recognized as critical an element to the development of a human being as sleep and nutrition. Play is as critical to the development of a human being as sleep and nutrition. No one's going to tell you that if a human being doesn't get sleep, that's healthy. So we can accept that. Nutrition, in the last 40 or 50 years, we've really understood a great deal more about the benefits of nutrition to the health and development of our species. But the next one on the shelf next to that is play. And there are enormous amounts of studies. Again, I'm happy to direct people to find this through the National Institute of Play, actually. Dr. Stuart Brown, he wrote a book called Play. He talks about this thing called play deficit. The high correlation of people who are incarcerated, young people and adults, significant deficits of play in their lives. Now, I'm not saying about if someone doesn't play, they're going to go to jail. That's not what we're saying. But there's a high correlation between people who have a deficit of playing in their lives and just don't learn those critical social skills, those emotional learning skills to, participate in our world in a really healthy, supportive way.
Stephanie, you had is your question the question you put in the chat? Some examples of one-on-one play?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
That would be great. I was also going to ask about the resources for the statistic, but I just searched National Institute of Play, and thank you.
Okay, well, that's one of them. But if I can, I'll find my page quickly. But let me answer your question first, then I'll give you that link to the page on Playmare with dozens of studies and research articles around the benefits of connection and play.
While you're looking, why don't you look for that? And I could share a work example of simple one-on-one play examples. So depending on context, one of the companies I like to look at a lot is Zingerman's, and they're a bunch of food-based businesses. Cool. And one of the things they do at the beginning of their meetings is they bring something delicious and they rate it. They rate it. Mm-hmm. And they do the whole thing. They're like, this mustard on a scale of 1 to 10, how is it on the creaminess and the piquancy? And, do you really feel the terroir in the mustard? And they do the whole thing. And that is play on topic in their domain, right? So in my team, we do similar. We do a connection exercise, which is like, what's the coolest meeting term or technique you've learned this week? And we just sort of play with like whack-doodle stuff, rice at a wedding. Mm-hmm. What the heck is rice at a wedding in a meeting? I was stinky fish. We got to see the stinky fish thing was hilarious. I don't know if you've seen the stinky fish challenge in Sweden. Don't watch it. It's hilarious. Yeah, you do want to watch it. It's really funny. But there's also a stinky fish meeting term. So things like that are topic based, that are relevant to what you're actually there to do. Yeah. And also exploratory and fun are great ways to connect.
Yeah. Hey, some great stuff's come through the chat room. I will note that I did add the link, Science of Play and Connection. Check there. A lot of the folks that I work with are educators. but probably 25% of my members or my community are people who work in the corporate training and academic sector. So check that out. If that's of use to you, it'll give you a few clues to start on. I'm going to answer all these questions and maps. That's when we'll start to wrap up, Elise. But can you give an example of a one-on-one play game, Stephanie? The first one that came to mind, and there are lots, is the experience I learned in person, but I've now found much more fun online. We won't do it now, but if you could imagine just for a moment, you and I, Stephanie, we could be with other people. We're only focused on each other. Is that you would make my image on the screen the speaker, so it's big, you pin it. I would pin yours. And then without taking my eyes off the screen, with a pen in my hand and paper on my desk, I would draw your portrait. Now, I can never look at what I'm drawing, and this will take about 30 seconds. And at the end of it, we show each other what we drew, the blind portrait. I learned this at a conference in, where was that? Iceland or something, years and years and years ago. And it's now morphed into one of my favorite online experiences. Now, you can do that in person, obviously, across the desk from somebody. But there's one activity, just needs two people to make it happen. Interestingly, you relate play to flow. In academic literature, flow is usually referenced as an individual state. It is an individual state, but here's what happens. If you get a lot of people in that same space at the same time, transformation is possible. Why? Because it is impossible to pretend when you are playing. Now, I don't mean when my 9-year-old pretends that he's Elise from Frozen and dresses up as a queen. That's not what I mean. That's still a playful moment. My point is that a lot of the issues we find with resistance and control and influence and dominance is when someone's being something they're not. They're being something that they're not. And that's the pretending I'm referring to. When you invite people into play, which is why it's such a powerful space, transformation is possible because people are who they are then. So my mother loses herself, totally absorbed in her gardening, and looks up and discovers it's dark. It's because she got herself lost. She was only being herself in that moment, and so when you bring those people, lots of those people together, that's when transformation is possible. So it is an individual state, but when you put it together in a group, it's pretty powerful. But there was something else here I noticed I needed to respond to. Oh, I thought there was another one. Okay, is this play best in the full group rather than breakouts? Oh, that's really depends on lots of situations, Rach. My preference, if it was a must choose, large group, small breakouts, always go with a large group. I love working with large groups. I've worked with thousands of people all at the same time because of the sheer energy just carries itself forward. But I love the intimacy of working with small groups as well. So I think because I'm leading a group, I love it when everyone is together. So that works great. But there are certain activities that work better with a large group and not so good when there's only a few of you. So today, knowing roughly the sort of numbers we would have, I chose activities I knew could work. But if I knew that there was a webinar I was a part of in Pakistan about a year ago, 50,000 people were on that call. Okay, that's going to change what I'm doing. That totally changed what I was going to do. So yeah, I don't think there's a preference either way.
Thank you,
Elise,
everybody, for sticking around with us all of this time and for playing and sharing your ideas about play. Thank you so much, Mark, for spending your morning with us. It's been a delight having you here. I'm looking forward to sharing this with everybody who didn't come and all of the people who are going to come and find ways to play with your resources is going to be amazing. So thank you, everybody. I think we've after partied it, and there's a glass of wine with my name on it. So.
Yeah, I've got to get a refill.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you, everybody. It's been wonderful. Bye-bye.
Recording is